Welcome, my name is Thomas, and this is Lighthouse Yoga, as well as Lighthouse Tarot and Astrology. Just want to say hello and thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and leave any comments that you might have after the video in the comments section below. I love to hear your questions, love to get feedback on these videos, and let me know what your interests are. We're looking at Stellarium, and this is a wonderful program, basically a virtual representation of the sky. And we can see the sun is actually moving towards the horizon in its setting phase. I'm coming to you from Evanston, Illinois, just outside of Chicago. It's just in the afternoon, about 2:30, so got a couple more hours of daylight, but you can see the sun heading toward the horizon. So what I'm going to do down here, if you're not familiar with this program, turning off the atmosphere so we can see the planets and the stars. I'm going to also turn off the ground. We're not going to need that ground because we're going to be moving through the whole zodiac, but I'm going to leave the cardinal points up there. That's really up to you. You can toggle them off, toggle them on. I like to leave them on just to remind myself about generally where the horizon is. Then I'm going to turn on the constellation art. And just briefly, I'm going to turn on the labels for the constellations. So you can see, of course, in addition to the 12 zodiacal signs, you have 76 classic, or 88 in total, but 76 classic other additional zodiacal signs, 33 above and 33 below. So below the zodiac, above the zodiac, if that wasn't clear. All right, so I'm just going to turn those off just because it's a little bit busy with the constellation labels on there, but of course we'll leave the planetary labels. So we're looking at the sun in Capricorn, there with Jupiter and Saturn. And just so it's not confusing, we're looking at the actual location of the sun and the other planets. In a Western tropical tradition of astrology, you're going to have the sun positioned in Aquarius. It's approximately 25 degrees, give or take 2 or 3 degrees, off from where the planets and the sun are actually located. So when we look at this program, we're looking at what we could call the sidereal or the Vedic, essentially the present moment locations of where the stars and the planets actually are located. So I can say that several different ways, but it all amounts to the same. In the sidereal, in the Vedic, they're playing around with this 13th sign of Ophiuchus, but we stick with the classical 12 signs. This astrology that I'm working with and that I've learned and that I like to teach is based in alchemy. And with the alchemical system, the 12 sign zodiac, as well as the 7 planets, the 7 main planets, the inner planets, are the ones that we work with. So of course we talk about Pluto, Uranus, Neptune. All of those are valid and very important, but as far as the alchemy goes, right, we're sticking with the house rulership of those 7 inner planets, we might say. All right, so hopefully that clears things up, but ask questions if you have questions about that. Some people will find it a little bit confusing, a little bit disheartening, because they look at this program, they type in their birth date, and they say, okay, they expect to find their sun in Capricorn. In Western astrology, I'm a Capricorn, but when I look at in this program where the sun actually was when I was born, it's in the sign of Sagittarius. So that makes me a Sagittarius. And some people feel very, very strongly about this because we say that our astrology chart is our map for our life. And if that map is off by 25 degrees or even a whole sign in some cases, we want to know that. And we can have the impression that, oh, I'm a Capricorn for most of my life, but then when I come to find that I'm a Sagittarius, I feel much more in tune with being a Sagittarius. I actually always have. My brother is a Sagittarius in the Western tradition, and I was always kind of jealous of him, not just because he was my brother, but because I felt an affinity with that sign of Sagittarius. Sagittarius is also the teacher. It's a sign of the teacher and philosophy and ideology, and that's very much my passion, very much my interest. So I'm much more in line with the Sagittarius, and I have a lot of traits of the Capricornian of that Earth sign, but I actually get that from Taurus, which is my rising sign. So I have Taurus on the horizon. All right, so enough about that, but again, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to share, to ask questions. We just saw that Saturn-Jupiter conjunction back on the solstice at the end of 2020. That was also right in the beginning of Capricorn, and now the sun is crossing over that space. And as the sun passes through that space and eventually catches up to Jupiter, we're going to kind of feel the full thrust and scope of that energy as Saturn and Jupiter were coming together. And we can think about that as, a kind of expansion and a very focused, very channeled, right? Saturn's going to come in and really regulate the impulsiveness of Jupiter. So the energy of Jupiter is still there, and Saturn is there to really guide and shape, really channel that energy. And all of that happening in the house of authority, of government, in Capricorn's house, this higher law, we could say, that's the energy that's coming down, right? We're seeing an energy of a higher power come through. And again, the sun is just kind of, continuing to highlight that and really bring things and make them a little bit more tangible. We'll get to Mercury in a moment, but one of the things I wanted to talk about in this video, it's a little bit late, a little bit belated, but we had Mars conjunct Uranus in Aries on the 20th of January. And many of us are familiar with what was taking place on the 20th of January, as that was our inauguration in the United States. And that inauguration is a kind of commencement, if you will, a beginning, a pushing off, a shoving off from the shore of a new administration, of a new power. And as that comes with Mars conjunct Uranus in Aries, right, we're going to see this being a very aggressive, very forward moving, very no nonsense, sort of winner take all kind of force. And whether that sounds good to you or bad to you, that depends on which side of the aisle that you're on. Personally, I am not on any particular aisle. I'm on the side of you and your growth and understanding and expansion. And that means, in many ways, seeing the bigger picture beyond my side or your side, their side or my side. We won, they lost, we lost, they won. Right? We're recognizing all of that as being part of duality, as part of this give and take. And although that's necessary for things to kind of play out, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, we're trying to understand things from a higher perspective where we're not so torn, or our emotions are not at the mercy of that push and pull of those contests. So sometimes, of course, we'll still fall into that, but our goal is to have that higher perspective. So what we're seeing playing out from this higher perspective, again, is a much more forceful, much more direct kind of an administration, if we could apply it to that, right? If we were going to do a chart for the inauguration, that's one thing we would notice. The other thing we would notice is that all of this happening in cardinal fire of Aries was in a square, right, 90 degrees, give or take, to Jupiter, Sun, and Saturn in Capricorn, cardinal Earth, right? So when you have planets in the cardinal signs, or in the same cardinal signs, or in the same fixed signs, we're going to know that they're square because they're on that cardinal cross, or the fixed cross, or the mutable cross. Right? And you can think of just like a equilateral cross, a four-sided cross, right? Equal length arms, right? You have all those right angles, so we can recognize those squares that way. So all of that in square, right? We think of squares as being dynamic tension, right? That there's a push and a pull between the energies of Saturn, Jupiter, and the Sun with that Mars and Uranus, right? And very, very structured, and yet the potential is there for major shift, major change, or solidifying things in a very, very new direction, or we could say, I'm hesitating to say a direct direction, but a more established and more convincing direction, let's say it that way. So that's what was going on around the inauguration, and this is still playing out, right? Today's the 26th, just a few days later, and we've got this this sun is going to catch up to Jupiter in just the next couple days. Now, the other thing that's going on is Mercury is getting ready to go retrograde. Mercury is going to dip into Aquarius and then come back into Capricorn. So sometimes we think of Mercury as the messenger planet, right? Mercury governs the vocal cords, the thyroid gland in the throat. We think of Mercury as commerce. We think of Mercury as communication, right? And when Mercury is going retrograde, Mercury is passing between the Earth and the Sun. And so I like to interpret this as Mercury bringing the message. You know, when Mercury goes direct, it goes around the far side of the Sun. It's like, going to pick up the mail. And then as it comes back around and it goes retrograde, it's delivering the mail, right? Mercury is coming to bring the messages to Earth. So during this Mercury retrograde, as Mercury comes through the plane or closer to the Earth, we're going to get new information, right? And some of that is going to be, so intense as Mercury comes back, combust the Sun. But we want to listen closely, and that's why people say, you have to take your time when you're in Mercury retrograde. You've got to double check and triple check, cross all the T's and dot all the I's. Right? Really make sure that that contract is good, or some people say don't even sign contracts. But again, it's just a call to listen more closely, right? Mercury is coming to deliver some messages. So inward, right? Introvert, right? And that's really true of all the retrograde planets. Every time you have a retrograde planet in a chart, or during a time of retrograde motion, we're getting things in a sort of a louder way, right? The messages from that planet are amplified, right? Because we're closer to those planets. Again, just a way to think about it. You don't have to take it so literally, although nothing wrong if you do. But in many ways, we're trying to look at this as a kind of philosophical study, a psychological study, where the planets, the energies of the houses and the signs, right, are all speaking to some aspect of ourselves. And that brings me to really the last thing I wanted to say, is that we all have all the planets and all the signs in our chart, right? We are linked to this zodiacal circle, right? So as we travel around, going back towards Pisces and Aries, we can know that we also have Taurus. Even if there aren't any planets, or the sign Taurus doesn't feature in a big way in our chart, right? For instance, if this was a chart that we were looking at right now, Taurus would be somewhere in the 11th and 12th house cusp, and there are no planets there, nothing too significant. So we might be, have a tendency to overlook Taurus, but we're still going to recognize that we have that fixed Earth energy, that stable, that strong and solid sort of workhorse ethic of Taurus in our chart, right? It's still there, even though it might not be represented or highlighted with a planet. The moon is almost full, right? And that moon is going to be absolutely full once it gets into Capricorn, once it is opposite the sun in Capricorn, once it gets into Cancer. We're going to have that full moon in Cancer, and really kind of homecoming, right? As the moon moves into Cancer, the house of the moon is Cancer, and that full moon, that more radiant moon, speaking to some things coming home, right? Really showing us what's important, right? Things that are near and dear to us. And it'll be a while before Leo and Virgo see much more action other than the moon passing through. We're going to get the next couple full moons will be in Leo and in Virgo. And then eventually, as things progress, Libra, Scorpio, and then we are back to Sagittarius. And that's going to be, the end of this year, which is just bonkers to think about, but time is moving so quickly these days. I'm sure December will be here before we know it. So let's take our time. Let's enjoy the days. Let's enjoy the snow. Let's enjoy even the cold weather. The days are getting longer, so you can take delight in the lighter evenings, and enjoy your family, enjoy your friends, take good care of each other, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.